I titled today's mind map, Make the Impossible Possible. Today's conversation is stimulated by this quote here, which I like to revisit often from Think and Grow Rich, in which he states, "A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing that I did with it was to turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do." Well, I don't know about you, but for me, I can benefit from reminding myself that it is possible for me to not only achieve what I desire, but also do it in a way that I desire. I had a conversation yesterday with a client who has built a very successful business, earns a lot of money, let's say. And not only that, performs a service that he truly enjoys. He enjoys working with his clients. He enjoys working with his team. He enjoys working with his vendors. And one of the things that we talked about was not only bringing forth the next level of success, but doing it from a place of flow. A person can show up and, get a job or a career, or they can start a business, and they may find that there are certain things that they do that they enjoy doing. And perhaps there are certain things that they don't enjoy doing, but they seem to force themselves to do those things because they believe that it is not possible for them to create the success, experience the success, without doing those things or doing those things differently from different perspectives. In other words, they're identifying with, a lot of times unconsciously, the word impossible in mind, and it plays out in how they relate with time and space. So I have a conversation with them, and they may say, well, this reason or that reason. Now, we are taught that time and space can be transcended by thought, and this is an encouraging thought process here, a good train of thought, where he's saying he no longer wants to identify nor have within his awareness any idea of impossibility. Now, how this works experientially is that when a person says, I not only want this end result, but I want to do it in the way that I want to do it. I want flow. I want love on the journey to realizing my vision. And no matter what they have believed, as far as past experiences goes, as far as suggestions goes, or what other people are saying, they say those are just interpretations, thought processes. And we know that what we identify with as far as thought processes or interpretations seems to play out as the theater of life. So one of the things that we did was we encourage possibility-based thinking. And I said, you can take your business to the next level. You can produce whatever successes that you want. You can build your team further, and you can find creative ways to transcend time and space and thus experience the flow. And we're not bound by time or space, such as the team is in this location and that location, and so there's conflict as far as schedules go. Those are thinking patterns that spawn, perhaps, from identification unconsciously at a deeper level with the word impossible, generally in life or in regards to the entrepreneurial journey. Same is to be said about space. We have certain deliverables, and we were taught that it takes X amount of time to meet the deliverables. Well, we've seen many businesses today that have transcended time. They're delivering in easier, faster ways that the world has never seen before because those that originated those expressions, the innovation, were encouraging that it is possible to think differently. And differently in this regard is transcending time and space to the word possible. So I believe one of the reasons why he suggested this is so that we wouldn't identify the word impossible for living the kind of life that we want to live. I mean, we can look at this from the perspective of the entrepreneurial journey. We can also look at this from the perspective of any area of our life. Where are we associating the word impossible to how we truly want to live? Because we've been discussing this. What we truly love cannot be taken away from us unless we take it away from ourselves. So the person can absolutely have the business that they want and do it in the way that they want. As we started to get deeper into this conversation, creative ideas and innovative ways were brought to the surface. He came up with the ideas himself. I didn't even give the ideas. Certainly, I have many years of consulting experience, and I have a lot of different, not only ideas, but ways that I have seen businesses, CEOs, professionals transcend time and space and not only produce the success, but also do it in the way that they wanted, which was from a place of love and flow and joy. But he had the ideas within himself, and all he needed to do was bring himself back into the state of mind of possibility. So let's discuss this further. Thomas Trord said very deep and fascinating things. So I want to bring two contributions that he has made to mental science into our discussion today. First relates to space, and second relates to time. So he says, form implies extension in space and also limitation within certain boundaries. Thought implies neither. So let's relate this over to thought of possibility. And he says, when therefore we think of life as existing in any particular form, we associate it with the idea of extension in space, so that an elephant may be said to consist of a vastly larger amount of living substance than a mouse. But if we think of life as the fact of livingness, we do not associate it with any idea of extension. And we at once realize that the mouse is quite as much alive as the elephant, notwithstanding the difference in the size. The important point of this distinction is that if we can conceive of anything as entirely devoid of the element of extension in space, it must be present in its entire totality anywhere and everywhere, that is to say, at every point of space simultaneously. So, one word, possibility. Or we could say, letting go of impossibility-based thinking to bring forth harmony and possibility. See, we were talking about connectivity with assets, resources, relationships, opportunities, his existing understanding, my existing understanding, and his network, and all the other elements and aspects and people that he has access to, because we are all connected, even in the most obvious sense, via the internet. Although we might not see this connectivity if we're unconsciously identifying with the word impossible. So that's why we continue these discussions, because as I said, we can, if we're not maintaining our flow or an alpha frequency, brainwave frequency, watch the discussion I did on anandamide, we may identify with overthinking or certain thinking patterns such as impossible and thus not see the connections. So we know that thought or the idea of possibility, this can be done. Encouraging it through a meditation or through a conversation. I'm going to provide an exercise at the end, which actually was from the Master Key system. Now, I've done a lengthy video on the different exercises that were contained within the Master Key system. I'll put a link in the description to it. which further encourages the creative use of imagination and allow the expression. Body is an instrument of expression. Everything, the elephant, the mouse, is an expression of mind. And there's one determining factor. What do we say of the I am within ourselves? I promise, as we get better at this with practice, as I have been experiencing this as well, and many that I've had thousands of conversations with have also experienced this as well, when they change their own thinking pattern, or more accurately put, identify with the true thinking pattern of possibility, things change, behaviors change, environments change. They all of a sudden see the opportunities, the connectivities they never saw before. Now, this is not new to us. We do this. As a matter of fact, we do this all the time, a lot of times unconsciously. It's just maybe for certain aspects of the journey or aspects of life, such as the entrepreneurial journey, career, relationships. We may identify with the word impossible, and thus it's important too. Let's go back to the quote here. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing that I did with it was to turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do. See, whether we believe it's possible or impossible, that's an individualized belief. And the individualized belief plays out as the theater of expression of body, mind, in how we relate to others, environment, circumstance, information, and how they relate to us in ways that are known and unknown. Now let's talk about time, because one can say, I am limited by time and space, and thus it's impossible. Notice this. A lot of times when I hear conversations, and I've had these conversations within myself, and I was identifying with them, and I aim to more so every day ensure that I'm transcending past certain self-imposed limitations in regards to time and space by meditating on certain words, certain thinking patterns. Now, as I've had these conversations many times, even within myself, as mentioned, I found certain patterns that were associated with the word impossible. Impossible because of the space, the distance between here and this other country, time, all these things. And as I've been working with this information and continue to do so, I find creative ways to transcend past the time and space. I remember I had a conversation with one of my earlier mentors, and he had awakened this in my mind. And the conversation went something like, he said to me, you do 10 to 12 hours of work, and this was when I was working in corporate 15 years ago or something like that. He told me this. He said, you do 12 to 15 hours a day. And I was considered a person that really was identified that I have to do way more in order to produce the results, rather than looking at creative ways of transcending time and space, coming up with innovative ideas, leveraging technology, working with the relationships, automation, delegation, elimination in part or in whole or in combination in some shape or form. I was just associating do more work with the end result, when the truth of the matter is effective work, or that which is in contribution and harmony, which is leverage. So 1 hour of work could produce 8 hours of output. So he said to me, 12 to 15 hours you do this, you can be doing what you're doing in 6 to 8 hours. And I was thinking, how's this possible? But he said it to me in a way that he believed it, because he produced it in his life. And that believability, or that transference of experience, a reference experience, or however he said it in a certain way, similar to how Napoleon Hill had said it, said, it could be possible. And then it actually opened up my mind, and I said to him, well, if that's the case, then I could do it in 1 hour. I could produce the same output. And it actually ended up happening, because what I noticed as I was progressing in my career was I was producing way more output just from entertaining the idea that it was possible to transcend time and space. I saw the ways, and I actually found myself automatically behaving. Body's an expression of mind. from the premise of possibility. And so what ends up happening then, as I continued my journey, is I started to produce the same output as far as income and whatever kind of production end result for the marketplace as a result of further encouraging that I can get even more output and do it in 1 hour. So it's interesting because 15 years ago, it would take me 15 hours, 12 or 15 hours to produce the same output as far as earnings and service goes in an hour. Now, what was the causative factor? One may say, oh, well, you do things differently, and now you're doing this, and before you were doing that, and so forth. We're taught to go to the cause within, and I would say that the cause within was the encouraging of possibility, that it is possible. Now, let's look at the second part here. He says, the scientific definition of time is that it is the period occupied by a body in passing from one given point in space to another. And therefore, according to this definition, when there is no space, there can be no time. And hence that conception of spirit, which realizes it as devoid of the element of space, must realize it as being devoid of the element of time also. And we therefore find that the conception of spirit as pure thought, and not as concrete form, is the conception of it as subsisting perfectly, independently of the elements of time and space. From this, it follows that if the idea of anything is conceived as existing on this level, it can only represent that thing as being actually present here and now. In this view of things, nothing can be remote from us, either in time or space. Either the idea is entirely dissipated or it exists as an actual present entity, and not as something that shall be in the future, for where there is no sequence in time, there can be no future. Similarly, where there is no space, there can be no conception of anything as being at a distance from us. When the elements of time and space are eliminated, all our ideas of things must necessarily be as subsisting in a universal here and on an everlasting now. This is, no doubt, a highly abstract conception, but I would ask the student to endeavor to grasp it thoroughly, since it is of vital importance in the practical application of mental science, as will appear further on. So, we want to look at our thinking patterns. We have the ability to observe our thinking patterns and say, if time and space is really a construct based on our thinking patterns, and practically so, it plays out in how we go about doing our things. Things take a lot of time, a lot of frustration because logistically the space is whatever. If we would like to transcend past that, to find the creative ways which are actually within us, then we want to meditate on the word possibility. Now, Charles Haanel, he contributes to this by saying, mind is creative, and the principle upon which this law is based is sound and legitimate and is inherent in the nature of things, but this creative power does not originate in the individual but the universal, which is the source and fountain of all energy and substance. So we want to, you could say, draw our ideas from the universal mind by releasing from the limited thinking, by releasing from the self-imposed limiting idea of impossible. So as soon as we say impossible in relation to different things in our life, we begin to see and experience reality, and nobody can persuade us but ourselves of what we see. We will see impossibility as far as our eyes can see. Now, I've seen this a lot in the entrepreneurial journey. I've seen this in the journey of relationships. I've seen this in the journey of personal life, in all areas of my life. And till this day, I want to ensure that as I go about, that I'm observing to the best of my ability upon reflection at the end of the day, or perhaps real time in conversation with others, as I go about the day-to-day tasks or projects that I got to do, that whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm not identifying with certain impossibility-based thought processes, because I know that as I identify with it, I will begin to see those experiences reflected in this world. I'll see it. And it could be seen as things like, I don't know how we're going to be able to do this with the limiting factors, and all kinds of different thinking processes, which, again, as we identify with certain thinking processes, some way, somehow, it spreads out, because what we're really doing is we're spreading it out to play out the theater. How we relate to others, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to environment, how we relate to the resources, and so forth. Now, this is not a new way of thinking. This is an unconscious process by those that have the ability to do this, that live from the premise of, you know what, I'll figure it out. Some way, somehow, we're going to make this happen. It's possible, and so forth. And they might not articulate it in a way that Thomas Trord had discussed it over here, but we can encourage it more so. And certainly for me, I was encouraging it all throughout my journey, and I continue to encourage this and say the same thing many different ways to, you could say, dissolve certain thinking patterns that, for whatever the reason may be, I've identified with or I might entertain, which will bring me into impossibility-based states of mind, in which I'll see it in my experience. Frustration, stress, doing things in an unnecessary, complex, and convoluted way, rather than finding the effective way to produce the results. And it's spawned based on our thoughts. And so we want to encourage the idea that we can, and we'll find different ways to transcend time and space. And this is not just an idea that sounds nice. This is highly practical, such as the experiences that I shared. And we'll be discussing more experiences like this in the upcoming videos. So he says, the universal mind, being infinite and omnipotent, has unlimited resources at its command, and when we remember that it is also omnipresent, we cannot escape the conclusion that we must be an expression or manifestation of that mind. A recognition and understanding of the resources of the subconscious mind will indicate that the only difference between the subconscious and the universal is one of degree. They differ only as a drop of water differs from the ocean. They are the same in kind and quality. The difference is one of degree. So let's put this into application in relation to the master key system, in relation to what Thomas Trord had shared, in relation to further encouraging the idea of possibility. And we want to do this all day long. I suggest doing this all day long, because although we could do this as an exercise here, we can still do this in relation to the different aspects of the journey that we experience day to day. So the exercise from the Master Key System is as follows. He says, concentrate on harmony. And when I say concentrate, I mean all that the word implies. Concentrate so deeply, so earnestly, that you will be conscious of nothing but harmony. He says, remember, we learn by doing. It is in the practical application that the value consists. And the practical application is in mind, and the practical expression is what you end up doing. The different opportunities that you move forward with, the different creative ways you connect the team's resources, assets together to produce operational efficiencies, which then end up producing the result, transcending time and space, etc. Those are the effects of encouraging a thought process. So we encourage the word harmony. Now let's discuss this and then conclude it with an auto-suggestion to encourage. So harmony implies all is in connection, all is in harmony with your vision, and also it implies that the word possible means that you draw upon all the resources in ways that we would say are subconscious. We're not conscious of how we do this. By encouraging the thought that allows us to transcend self-imposed based limitations, or we could say thinking patterns that create unnecessary complexity in our behaviors, which is thinking pattern spawned, the way we do this is by looking at the word harmony and saying, everything is connected. How is everything connected? I mean, I'm making this video probably halfway across the world compared to where many are watching this video, but yet we're having the discussion right now in the eternal now. That is an example of how we are in harmony. Oh, wait a second. I'm on the process of building my business, bringing forth this ideal relationship, creating the kind of success that I want. And here is the information at the exact time now in which it is in contribution to my vision. Or, wait a second, if what he's saying is true, can I take an inventory of the different relationships, the resources, the assets that I have, and can I come up with creative ways? And if I, let's say, for whatever the reason, think that I cannot, can I believe that I can? And perhaps a person could show up, a book may show up, some information may show up, which will allow me to transcend the time and space by connecting them together in creative ways. And if that seems too logical for me, then can I allow my subconscious mind to figure out the ways and hows? Do I feel at ease with that, knowing that I'm in harmony with all the resources and everything, all the elements? I'm one with all of it. As I release from certain thinking patterns that seem to have created a disconnect, that I was one with all of this, and I encourage it. Do I feel it more so? As I go about my day-to-day, am I seeing it more so? Do I feel connected physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually with the five sensory experience from the perspective of recognizing the different elements, the different areas of life, which we can say are theatrical aspects like time and space, but are in contribution to the vision? And so thus I am in harmony. Inner and outer are in harmony. They're one. I know we say inner and outer, but they're one. Outer is a reflection of what's going on within. Body is an expression of mind. Environment is an expression of mind. And encourage these kinds of ways of thinking. These have been my own thinking patterns that I'm sharing here as a result of concentrating on the word harmony. So by concentrating on the word harmony, we actually do the very thing that he suggested here in Think and Grow Rich, where he says, a great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did was turn it to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do. Now, one can actually go and neatly clip it out of the book, like how he suggests, or we could do the very source-based thing and clip it out of our imagining. And since we know that imagination or thinking or inner conversation, inner dialogue, or what we concentrate on internally and our perception as a result of that, and our thinking patterns and ways of being, we could say our self-image in relation to, is what is expressing as our behaviors and how we relate to others and how others relate to us, environments, and so forth, then we know that we make the change within. And what's the change? The change is more of the encouraging of the truth. So again, let's reflect back on what Charles Haanel said. He said, the universal mind, being infinite and omnipotent, has unlimited resources at its command, and when we remember that it is also omnipresent, we cannot escape the conclusion that we must be an expression or manifestation of that mind. And so therefore we have access to all that will allow us to transcend past self-imposed limitation thought processes, which we would call impossible. So the way we see it is we actually see the opportunities. We connect them. We save the time, we could say. A person produces results a lot faster, easier. They're able to do it in creative ways, also transcending space. I mean, look at the technology and innovation we see nowadays. All of this is a spawn of a person's thinking pattern, believing that it is possible. Now, the same is to be said about artistic expression, dance, any kind of creative expression, day-to-day life. I look at life as an artistic expression, and it is an artistic expression based on the thinking patterns, both consciously and unconsciously, that we identify with. And we want to identify with words, thought processes in relation to the words that stimulate the expression in body and communication and ways of being, let's say, or connecting. The infinite resources that are already available that we will see once we see it within ourselves. So we see really from an inner eye of understanding. And the understanding really is that everything is in harmony and in contribution. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion. We could say, I realize that within myself is infinite possibility. As I maintain this connection in relation to the harmony of all by dwelling in and from harmony and possibility, I'm able to see clearly the opportunities that present themselves, and I find myself compelled automatically connecting the opportunities together and relating them over to my goals, my visions. I notice this increases in frequency, allowing me to transcend certain thought processes of limitation and impossibility in regards to time and space. As I further travel down this way of thinking within, I realize that the expression of it via body and environment is spawned from the travel of thinking patterns of possibility, further allowing me to go deeper and higher within, bringing forth even more creative innovation and expressing it from the universal mind, the source of all that ever existed, ever will exist in the eternal now. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.